going to tell you. It's going to be very confusing. So just try to make sense. Note that when a muscle is redder, deeper red color, it's got lots of myoglobin, it's got a lot of blood vessels. Okay? And if you think about it, you know, the chicken that's got to run in the barnyard, they have to be able to run pretty fast for whatever coyote's coming around. So the thigh and the leg are going to have lots of blood vessels. That's why it's darker. Okay? If I'm looking at like the chest of the chicken, they don't fly very much. They move their wings, but they don't fly much. So that muscle is not red. It's blue in comparison. Less blood vessels. It should make sense that the more blood that you have, the greater the delivery of oxygen. You gotta have oxygen, you gotta have myoglobin. Okay? So again, this hopefully makes sense to you. Remember we talked about oxidative. Anytime you see the word oxidative, we're talking about aerobic respiration. Anytime I see glycolytic, I'm talking about anaerobic. If I have aerobic, that means I've got to have lots of oxygen. Cardiovascular. Exercise is going to rely on oxidative fibers. Sprints, weightlifting, resistance training, we're going to rely on glycolytic fibers. You don't need to do a lot of breathing. In fact, when you're lifting the weight and you're pumping that weight, you're constricting the blood vessel, which means you're getting less oxygen to the muscle. So those are going to be, just kind of imagine what you're doing instead of memorizing it again. Okay? Try to make sense of it. Okay. So what I wanted to do is to then just go and finish out this section on aerobic exercise. Okay? So in aerobic exercise, that means I'm using oxidative fibers, aerobic respiration, which means I'm utilizing my Krebs cycle, right? That's my primary, and I'm making, what, 36 ATP for every molecule of glucose. That's kind of a factoid that you probably had to learn sometime, okay, somewhere close to that. So you increase the amount of capillaries going to the muscle. Okay, you're going to enhance, because you got to get oxygen down there. How are we going to get oxygen down there? Well, it's carried in hemoglobin until it gets to then my muscle, and then I got stores of myoglobin. So I'm going to increase my muscle capillaries so I get oxygen. I got to create a lot of ATP energy when I'm doing cardiovascular. Just think about running the marathon. That's cardiovascular, that's not resistance. So if I'm running 26 miles, so to think I'm going to have more mitochondria to produce the ATP to allow me to get to that end line, the finish line. Okay, so I'm increasing that. Now, if I'm relying on oxygen, I must have an increase in myoglobin. So my myoglobin stores are going to increase, and so are my glycogen stores. Where is glycogen stored in a myofiber? What organelle? A glycosome. Okay, so a glycosome is where we store glycogen. Tell me, where are the only two places in the body where I have then glycogen stores? One of which we just learned, skeletal muscle, and the other one is liver. Those are the only two places in the body where I'm going to have then an enhanced number of glycosomes. Okay? So I have to then have increased myoglobin because I'm relying on oxygen. It's called cardiovascular. Okay? I need to enhance my blood circulation. That's why I'm doing cardiovascular. Okay? And when I'm training for a marathon, remember I said all muscles have all three fiber types, right? But depending upon what you're doing with those muscles, you're going to have an abundance of one type over another, and you can convert them. So when you're doing a cardiovascular training, like for training for a marathon, I'm gonna convert all of my fast glycolytic into fast oxidative. So my fast glycolytic and the fast oxidative can switch depending upon the needs of my muscle. Okay? And so how do I know that? Well, a marathon, I gotta have lots of oxygen. I've gotta be breathing. Gotta have a lot of mitochondria. Gotta have lots of blood capillaries. I gotta run 26 miles. So therefore, I'm going to rely greater on my oxidative fibers. And in fact, I'm going to start switching them on over, the glycolytic into oxidative. And when I'm doing cardiovascular, I'm not trying to build muscle. I'm just trying to enhance my cardiovascular system. The heart pumping better, more efficiently, increasing my capillary load, my blood load. Okay? I'm not trying to bulk. If you're trying to do that by doing, you're doing the wrong exercise. Your trainer's telling you something really bizarre. Okay? We only use cardiovascular for endurance. So that's the effect of aerobic exercise. What about resistance exercise? Now, on resistance, again, we're doing sprints, we're doing mega weightlifting, okay? And we're relying more on anaerobic respiration, because when I'm lifting weights, man, the muscle's getting so big that it's clamping down on the blood vessels and it reduces the oxygen output. So it squeezes them. So it's gonna go anaerobic. Anytime I'm doing fast, I'm gonna do anaerobic. So what's gonna happen? When I'm doing this, I'm going to, hopefully, if you're trying to do resistance training, you're trying to bulk. Try to enlarge and call that muscle hypertrophy. We want to increase the size of the muscle. I mean, what else would you be doing? I mean, when you're using 5-pound weights, you're just trying to get the circulation going. But if you're pushing 150 pounds, you're not just trying to get the circulation going, you're trying to build muscle, aren't you? Okay? So I'm going to increase my muscle size. Now, I do have to have energy, so I'm going to have more mitochondria. But now, as my muscle increases, I'm going to start having more myofilaments. Hopefully it makes some sense that if I'm going from a normal size biceps brachii to now bulking it, what has to increase in number? The myofilaments. And how else am I going to increase the size of a muscle? Okay, so I'm going to increase myofilaments, and as I'm doing that, the more myofilaments that I have, and what are those found in? Where are my myofilaments found? In my myofibrils. So that means that I'm going to have lots more glycosomes in there too. Okay? All right. And then in this case, if I'm really training to do some kind of competition over at Venice Beach or wherever you're going to go, okay, to do the competition, I'm going to convert my fast oxidative into fast glycolytic. I want to increase those fibers because those are going to help me bulk. Okay? So notice which ones are interchangeable. Fast glycolytic, fast oxidative. Not the slow, just the fast. So I can interconvert those depending upon what I'm doing with my muscle, what I want to achieve in my muscle exercise. This particular diagram just indicates, just shows that as you start to use your muscle, it will reach a point where additional exercise is not going to be building anything. You know what I'm saying? So you're starting with 2-pound weights. You can do that for a couple weeks, and then after that, you're not getting much benefit of it. You got to up it. You're going to go to then 4 pounds maybe, or 5 pounds, right? And then you do the 5-pound weights until your muscles get used to that, and then you switch it on over to 8-pound weights, right? So that's what is called the overload principle. So if this is your current fitness state, and as you start either doing cardiovascular or doing resistance training, as you utilize the muscles, your muscles are gonna respond to a certain point, an upper limit, and then after that point, unless you step it up, it's gonna remain the same. So what you then do is you're gonna adapt to that overload, and then you're gonna increase that, maybe increase your reps, do whatever you gotta do, and then it gets to a point where you're not getting any more benefit from that exercise until you up it. So this means just simply, you reach an overload, and then you are going to have muscle memory, and then you're going to then have to, and if you want to continue bulking up, change the weight, change the number of reps. I mean, that's a simple thing. So if your trainer's not telling you to do that, well then that trainer is just not doing their stuff. Okay, so on the overload principle then, oops. Okay. What you're trying to do is you're trying to increase muscle strength, whether it's cardiovascular or whether it's for resistance training. Okay? And as you work the muscle, the muscle will adapt. And so then what you have to do then is increase the stress on the muscle in order to enhance it, to produce further gains. And then if you stop, what happens? It goes back down, right? So your muscles are always in a state of flux. If you want to enhance them, whatever you're doing, cardiovascular or resistance training, then you reach an upper limit, and then you've got to push it a little bit more to get it to the next. The more demand you place on the muscles, the more responsibility. The less that you put on the stress, then they're going to start to fizzle out, right? So you can see like football players. During their prime, when they're football players, they've got lots of muscles. But if they stop utilizing those muscles, what happens to them? You start to lose the muscles, right? So that's all this is saying, is that you either have to use it, increase it, or lose it. That's what it is. Okay, so what fiber types can be converted from one type to another? Fast and fast. Glycolytic, fast, oxidative. Those can switch. Okay, depending upon what you're trying to accomplish. What type of exercise leads to hypertrophy? You're going to do resistance or anaerobic. Okay. And what type leads to more myoglobin and capillaries? It's going to be predominant capillary, but I just want you to also note that you do have to have some increased myoglobin even when you're doing some resistance training. But you have to know that the capillaries are going to be compressed when you contract the muscle. It's just going to squeeze so that it's going to reduce the oxygen. Okay. All right, so at this point, then we're not going to finish this part out. It will not be on this test. It will be at the beginning. When we come back, after we finish this exam, we'll go ahead and do an overview of this, and then I'll include the questions on this as part of my comprehensive final. Okay? So, no sense in getting into more physiology right now. I think you've got enough to learn on this section here. Okay.